With influences ranging from Opeth to the Carpenters, you simply must listen to C. Duncan. Because once you hear it, his music that is, you're going to realize how ridiculous and awesome it is that he likes Opeth. Hey, it's Matt O'Leary, and it's time for a review of the new album, It's Only a Love Song, by Scottish singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist Christopher Duncan, or C. Duncan. C. Duncan's been a personal favorite of mine since his debut album 10 years ago called Architect, which was this very lavish, very dense Baroque pop or chamber pop sound. It's really like a puff pastry of sounds. There's just layer after layer of these buttery organic textures, some claps and snaps, some strings and synths, some acoustic guitar. Clearly very classically trained, but inspired by indie folk and art pop, all tied together by Duncan's very natural, vibrato-rich voice. And again, just layer after layer of it. He never stops layering. It was a statement of a debut album, and just 1 year later, he went in a much icier synth pop direction on The Midnight Sun, his second album, which had drum machines and MIDI sounds galore. It's very much a product of that bedroom recording. Coming off the debut, it took me a while to get into this album, but eventually it became an all-timer for me. I mean, it is filled with the same melodic and harmonic depth as the first album, but with such a consistent mood. It's his vibe record, it's just such a specific vibe and mood, and for me, that's like the month of January. It just kind of represents that. It's very wintry. I can't take credit for this, but someone said about the album, it's like a barrel of smoke being poured over your head. And after nominations for the Mercury Prize and Scottish Album of the Year and a tour with Elbow, he actually ended up teaming up with a member of Elbow, Craig Potter, who produced his third album, 2019's Health. And this might be the C. Duncan album that I return to the most. I don't know if it's his best because they're all brilliant, but I think teaming up with a producer for some fresh ideas, it really led to a very full-bodied sound. This thing sounds polished, and I think it just brought some freshness to the sound. And it's more diverse, just track to track, which I tend to like more than most in albums. It's just that kind of slingshot back and forth. In this case, from a kind of eerie ballad to an indie pop banger and then back again. And fourth came 2021's album Alluvium, which saw Duncan retreat back to his home studio, which was a move I found understandable, but also a little bit artistically stifling. There's some great stuff here, but it's the first album that felt a little bit like a retread. On the first three, he had really gone in new directions with each move. But on this one, it felt like a little too expected. Again, there are some great songs on here, like the title track and the first maybe 4 or 5 songs. There's something very old-fashioned about his music. It's really steeped in mid-century romanticism and just a classical sensibility, but also old-fashioned in its lyrical vulnerability. He's become very direct and very sentimental in these recent albums, which I think is very set apart from modern music's irony and melodrama. And nothing could be more sentimental or romantic than It's Only a Love Song. This album really leans into the romance big time, both lyrically and musically. The first track really sets the tone in that way with this lavish piano melody. It's a melody where I swear I've heard it before, whether in some Disney movie or like Sinatra era classic song. The song Triste Clair de Lune has a similar familiarity. It really evokes 60s cinema with the swelling strings and the minor key riff. And the closing track, Time and Again, same thing. It's just such a momentous melody that has such a classically beautiful, familiar ring to it. The songs Think About It and Surface of a Fantasy are two of the more upbeat jams here, really bringing that breezy indie pop. They're well-written songs, very clever melodically, as always, but they bring to the forefront a flaw for me on the album, which is the production. I'm a composition guy above all. I care about writing first and foremost, and it tends to overwhelm and dominate a lot of other factors like production, but I just can't get over Some of the drum programming and just program beats on this album, they just sound a little bit lifeless to me, and I feel like with the compositions being really strong, something with just a little bit more presence, a little bit more life and energy would have really helped. The snare, for example, sounds so soft on these songs. It's so muffled and MIDI. And the bass lines are really cool, really well written. They're always dancing all over the place, but they just don't have that oomph. They don't have that presence in the mix. It's just that missing like punch from the rhythm section. The bass parts and the drums are quite sterile. I think the bedroom production approach really worked well on his second album, The Midnight Sun, because it was a synth pop album. You know, it was part of the whole vibe. But with this romantic 70s soft rock sound, the thing about those great soft rock, those swooning pop songs, I'm thinking like Bread or Carole King, is that the mixes sounded real and alive and present in a way that I think lacks a little bit on this album. Yet, you know, if I was hearing Duncan's music for the first time on this record, I think I'd be hooked. Like, the songwriting is that strong. The song Delirium has a great walking bass line and this verse melody that just carries you away like on this hot air balloon joyride in some fantastical world. And Worry is a jaw-dropping tune where the production style really fits those icy piano arpeggios. One criticism I've heard about his music, and this kind of pairs with the production thing a little bit, is just that the songs tend to sound a little bit samey across the album. And I think his voice is part of that a little bit. You know, his voice doesn't have like a whole lot of bite or edge or personality to it. It's pretty much just like soft, lush, and gorgeous all the time. But it is gorgeous. You can't deny that. And I think a lot of the writing really makes up for any of that sterility or sameness. Worry is a song that I think if any big name artist wrote it, there'd be essays. There'd be hundreds of TikTok videos with girls crying to it. So this album overall is a bit conflicting. You know, on one hand, this guy set such a high bar for being a brilliant composer, a great pop hook writer. But I feel like his album Health was a step into a new and exciting production direction, and I do realize I think I wanted him to continue down that path. As much as I empathize and understand his move to record at home again, you know, the comfort of it, the economy of it, the time to perfect every little part and detail, I get it. I also think the variety and the mixed nuts nature of the last couple albums really did help to balance out the vocal tone and the consistency of that. Whereas on this one, it is a lot more consistent and he's going for a more cohesive sound and vision. And I think he pulls it off in that respect, but it also draws attention to maybe his glaring flaw as an artist, which is that the songs do tend to sound a little bit the same. I do hope that Duncan branches out, maybe works with a new producer. I think his writing, his artistry totally deserves that. And with all the critiques in this review, I don't want it to sound too negative, because really this is like a way for me to talk about C. Duncan's music and just put it out there, because he's unknown, he's unrecognized, but he is amazing. So I urge you to go back and listen to those first 3 albums. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this album and C. Duncan's music in general. Let me know if there are other releases so far this year that I should check out. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and like this video because it's super helpful. And as always, thank you so much for watching.